Good afternoon, and I thought I'll do something a little bit different today. We're going to talk about Newcastle. And the thing that springs to mind when you mention Newcastle is the football club, Newcastle United, the Tyne Bridge, and Newcastle Brown Ale. It's one of the most famous beers on the planet. It's a British icon you can find in pubs from Newcastle to New York. But behind the legendary bottle, it is a story of bitter rivalries, a secret recipe forged after the Great War, and a wild journey that took a local hero and turned it into a global giant. This is a complete history of Newcastle Brown Ale, from a 5-brewery merger back in 1890 to a worldwide symbol of British brewing. This is a story of how one man's unexpected creation became a legend. Our story doesn't start with the ale, but with the brewery that gave it its name. In the late 19th century, Newcastle upon Tyne was an industrial powerhouse, and that industry made for thirsty work. The city was dotted with local family-run breweries, and in 1895 of them decided that they'd be stronger together. So a John Barris & Co., a Carr, Bross & Carr, two different Allison family firms, and Swinburne & Co. all merged to create a new powerhouse, Newcastle Breweries Limited. The new company was a force to be reckoned with in the north of England. The John Barris Company, with a history stretching back to 1770, ran the crucial Tyne Brewery, which quickly became the heart of the whole operation. This site, perched overlooking the city, would be the home of Newcastle Brewing for more than a century. To mark the union, the brewery adopted a logo that would become world famous, a 5-pointed blue star. Each point of the star represented one of the 5 founding families. The star was added to Newcastle Brown Ale bottles in 1928, and it was later overlaid with the iconic silhouette of the Tyne Bridge, forever tying the brand to the city. But the brewery's most famous creation was still decades away. You've got to remember that during the Industrial Revolution that was happening all over Britain, brown ale was relatively cheap, so the working man could afford something to wash away all the dust and crap that he sucked in when he was at work. And the birth of Newcastle Brown Ale is really a story of one man, Lieutenant Colonel James Herbert Porter. He was a 3rd-generation brewer and decorated veteran of the First World War, who came to Newcastle Breweries with a mission. In 1924, he was tasked with developing a brand new premium bottled ale. The goal was ambitious: create a beer that could go head to head with the popular pale ales coming out of Burton-on-Trent. For 3 years, Colonel Porter and his lead chemist, Archie Jones, tinkered in secret. They experimented endlessly, blending different styles and refining their methods. Porter's initial idea of blending a strong dark beer with a light amber ale was eventually streamlined into a single brew. They used carefully roasted malts to give the ale its unique reddish-brown colour, and what would become its famous slightly sweet character. When all the work was done, Porter was surprisingly hard on his own creation. He reportedly felt it was a failure because he'd been trying to recreate a Bass ale. The public, however, couldn't have disagreed more. Advertised for the first time on April 25th, 1927, Newcastle Brown Ale was an instant smash hit, marketed to the hard-working miner and labourers of the region. It sold for 9 shillings for a dozen pints and quickly became the talk of the town. Just years later, the ale dominated the prestige International Brewers Exhibition in London. It won the Brewing Trade Review Cup for the best bottled beer in the competition, and the medals it won are still pictured on its label today. Colonel Porter, who hadn't made a copy of a Burton Ale, he had made something entirely new, a beer that would come to define a city. In the decades that followed, Newcastle Brown Ale became more than just a beer. It became part of Tyneside identity. For the hard-working people of the northeast, the coal miners, the shipbuilders, this was their drink. It was a symbol of regional pride. The beer picked up a few affectionate nicknames. Locals called it Brewing or Newcastle Brown, or most famously, the dog. The story goes that the men would tell their partners that they were just popping out to see a man about a dog. A classic excuse for a quick trip to the pub for a bottle of Brown Ale. Its popularity exploded. Sales hit a high in the early 1970s, and it saw another massive boom in the 80s and early 90s. By 1997, it was the best-selling premium bottle ale in the entire UK. Its cultural footprint was huge. The beer was famously featured in a TV show, Auf Wiedersehen Pet, a series celebrating Geordie labourers. The brewery even sponsored the local football club Newcastle United, releasing special edition bottles featuring club legends like Kevin Keane and Alan Shearer. But its influence didn't stop at the UK border. It's in the United States, Newcastle Brown found a new life. While it was a working man's drink at home, in the US it seemed a trendy premium import embraced by a younger generation searching for something authentic. It became one of America's most influential beers, opening up a world beyond light lagers. The Geordie in a bottle had gone global, but its journey was just about to get a lot more complicated. The post-war era was a time of consolidation in British brewing, and Newcastle Brewers was right in the thick of it. In April 1960, a huge merger took place. Newcastle Breweries joined forces with Scottish Breweries, a company formed by the union of two Edinburgh giants, William Younger & Co. and William McEwan's & Co. The result was a new corporate behemoth, Scottish and Newcastle. The single move transformed the company from a regional player into a national force. The Tyne Brewery was still critical, but it was now just part of a much larger network. Scottish and Newcastle went on aggressive expansion, snapping up the other UK breweries, including Matthew Brown in 1987. Throughout the 80s and 90s, the company's growth was relentless. It expanded into hotel and pubs with the acquisition of Courage Brewery division in 1995. Scottish and Newcastle became the UK's #1 brewer. Its beer division was rebranded as Scottish Courage, and its portfolio was suddenly full of the biggest names in the industry. For Newcastle Brown Ale, all this corporate growth meant one thing: an even bigger stage. The local hero is now the flagship product of a multinational corporation. The company was a titan, but its very success made it prime target. The era of independent Scottish and Newcastle was coming to an end, and the Brown Ale was about to be cut off from its roots in a way that it would infuriate the locals. The 21st century brought the most dramatic and controversial chapter in the beer's history. In 2008, the Scottish and Newcastle empire was bought and carved up by two global giants, Carlsberg and Heineken. The UK assets, including Newcastle Brown, went to Heineken. Almost right away, the bond between the beer and its city began to crumble. In 2004, even before the takeover, plans were announced to close the historic Tyne Brewery. Production moved to Federation Brewery in Dunstan. For many Geordies, this was a betrayal. The move also meant that the beer lost its protected geographical indication status a legal designation from the EU that, like Champagne in France, tied it to its home city. But the change didn't stop there. In 2007, bottling was outsourced to John Smith's Brewery in Tadcaster, Yorkshire, and by 2010 all production had moved there, ending over a century of brewing on Tyneside. The beer was no longer brewed anywhere near Newcastle. Under Heineken, even the recipe became a source of conflict. In 2015, following pressure from activists in the US, the company had to remove the caramel colouring it had used since Heineken's takeover, switching back to roasted malt to get the famous colour. Then came a failed attempt to modernise the beer for the American market, making it hoppier to compete with the craft IPA trends. The new version, brewed in the US by Lagunitas, alienated fans who loved the original smooth malty taste. The backlash from American drinkers was so strong that it led to a surprise turnaround. After Lagunitas closed its Chicago brewery, Heineken announced in late 2024 that the American-made recipe was being scrapped, stating in 2025 the original UK recipe brewed back in Tadcaster would once again be exported to the US. The story of Newcastle Brown Ale is a journey of incredible highs and some pretty painful lows. It is a story of beer born from one man's vision, enhanced as the soul of a proud city, and then launched onto the world stage. It's also the story of a corporate ambition that made a giant, and at the cost of severing it from the very home that gave it its identity. From Colonel Porter's secret experiments to the pubs of the Northeast, from the trendy bars of America, and finally onto its long road back to its original taste. Through all the mergers and controversies, that Blue Star still shines as a symbol of resilience. It's a reminder that while you can take the ale out of Newcastle, you can't quite take the Newcastle out of the ale. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Britain's most iconic beers, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video the thumbs up, hit that notification bell for more videos, and let us know in the comments what your memories are of Newcastle Brown Ale. Do you have a favourite story about the dog? We'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching.